Ladies and gentlemen, it really feels like on a weekly basis at this point, we have a teenager chess prodigy ready to take on the best player in the world, Magnus Carlsen. He's not the world champion anymore because he stepped away from the title. He still holds the championships in rapid and blitz chess, but he's still the #1 player in the world. And it's pretty much not a debate. Now, I've taken a step back from making so much Magnus content here in 2024, but I had to make a video today because he was defeated by 17-year-old Belarusian Grandmaster Denis Lazovic. And Denis Lazovic is currently on prodigy watch in the chess world, including being unfairly accused of cheating by many top grandmasters. He is 100% legitimate, and it's an incredible story to see his rise over the last several years. And here's a match that he played against Magnus Carlsen. He beat him, and they played a 4-game match, and it was really, really fun stuff to witness. And it's awesome to see Magnus actually have to, fight against the younger generation. Because in his generation, Magnus is like really, really highly respected and feared. So it's just really cool to see. So first game, Magnus plays c4, knight to f6, knight c3, and we have an English with a reverse. Not even in English. This is in English, but this is a reverse Sicilian. It's basically e4, c5, but with colors reversed. And now Magnus plays d3. And the thing about rapid chess is you can take your opponents out of a comfort zone. You can play g3, bishop g2, you can play knight f3, but it's really nice to get an opponent out of a main line. d3 is a very rare move. I mean, to set up like this in the first 3 moves, already very deep down in the database. And Magnus spent 40 seconds on this move, so I don't know if he spilled coffee on his keyboard and then he had to clean things up, or if this is just part of his preparation. He was trying to improvise at the board. Now, Lazovic plays very principled. He takes the center. He puts 2 pawns in the center if it's possible, and he's going to put a knight there, right? So we have take, and now Magnus cannot develop his bishop this way, so he's going to develop it this way, which is why he plays g3. Knight c6, bishop g2. Lazovic safeguards the knight in the center with bishop to e6, both players castle, and this is our position after 8 moves. Very standard stuff, very equal game. White is going to try to utilize his queenside minority of pawns to attack and maybe bring the rook and utilize this bishop when the position opens up a little bit. Black might consider an attack on the king side or a direct confrontation in the center of the board so that white doesn't just easily get his game plan. Bishop d2 for Magnus. He's ready to bring his rook. Queen d7, and now that move takes its eye off of the g5 square, so the queen goes for the light squares instead of the dark squares, and that is why we see this move knight to g5. And the thing for a guy like Magnus, who is very experienced in a multitude of positions, it's really about getting some of these younger guys out of a comfort zone, even at the cost of sacrificing engine evaluation. Lazovic takes the knight on g5 within 7 seconds, and basically says, you know what, I don't need the bishop, I'm just going to build up on my dark squares like this, I'm going to push your bishop right back to where it was. And the question is, who's happier with this trade? We say don't trade knight for bishop, so you would think that, it's black who's worse, but not really. Black has a very active position. He brings his rook to the center. That's the first time Lazovic spent any time, really. He spent about 40 seconds on this move. It's a real question of, does he put his rook there and there? Or does he start attacking? He really doesn't want to destabilize his own position. He went down to 1 second because I made a move there. He really doesn't want to do that, but he plays rook d8, and the question becomes, what's going to happen if this rook? Right, so Magnus plays rook c1 and queen a4. Right, we see rook c1, queen a5. I told you, Magnus is going to try to play on the queen side. That's the entire idea. Denis takes on c3 and bishop d5. He's trying to play in the center of the board. Trying to trade Magnus's bishop. Very principled approach. And so Magnus here plays a really ugly move, but it's a move that makes a lot of sense. The move is f3. You see, if you don't play f3, if you play e4, you weaken this pawn. So I just go back and I say, well, we didn't trade, but who's going to guard this? Nobody, by the way. Literally nobody. So if you ignore me, you allow this, well, then white has no advantage. White has no advantage because you're not going to get any of that pressure. And rook b1, let's say black plays like b6. I mean, rook b1 is there's nothing. There's no advantage here for white whatsoever. So Magnus is forced to play this really ugly looking move. But the idea is actually pretty simple. He just wants to push this back, and that's what he does. He gets to a queenless middle game, and now he gets the bishop out onto a diagonal. That's all he needed to do. He just needed to preserve the smallest of advantages, and that's how he's going to apply pressure now. It's going to be a queenside battle. Now, Magnus begins opening up the position with his pawns and his bishop. Lazovic is fighting back. Now d4. Bishop d7, and he reroutes. Right? If Dennis is able to trade the bishops, he's going to be very happy. So Magnus is trying to preserve this position. Very slowly and very methodically improving his position. Now you see out of nowhere, white is better, like a little bit. Like the computer has life. It's like you use the defibrillator. Like, you know, a moment ago it was dead equal. But now what? Well, here comes this move c5. You see, Dennis took a step backwards to try to reroute into the position. c5. This is a masterful usage of the bishop pair. When you have the bishop pair in chess, you've got to preserve them and then activate them. And he's negating the movement of his opponent's pieces, Magnus, while also trying to make advantageous pawn trades and structural decisions to get an advantage. Bishop f1. Look at this. Bishop. Look at this. The bishops are back on the first rank, yet the advantage has never been bigger. How is that even possible? a3, bishop b5. And at some point, he's just going to slowly work his way in. And there it is. He found it. He maneuvered and got Dennis to 9 seconds. Just moments ago, Dennis had a full 2 minutes on the clock. But in this deep maneuvering game of like constantly, it's like in a boxing fight, you know, like you're boxing and you're feinting. You're faking that you're going to punch. So he's overloading his opponent's nervous system. And finally, he gets Dennis to commit to something. And there he is. Right? He's arriving. But Dennis is no slouch. I mean, he's going to defend himself. He's defending for over 40 moves. It's a very unpleasant position. Bishop d7, but Magnus sacrificing the rook. It's not even the best move. The computer wanted to preserve, but the position sort of disintegrates, and Dennis just unable to defend himself from the pressure. Like, Magnus wins a couple of pawns, and, you know, Stockfish might have held it. Magnus gives up both rooks, is ready to pick up this rook, and at a very, very, very nice first game. Very nice first game. Like, showing there's levels. You know, beating people in typical Magnus style, and looking to put away the match early. In the second game, Dennis tried to fight back. He played d4, right? We got knight f3, and we have a Cambridge Springs variation, a semi-Slav, a Moran from white, knight bd7, this kind of triangle setup. Very calm game, but Magnus doesn't wait very long. He plays e5. It's kind of the principal thing that you're supposed to do with black is to open up the position and say, you know what, like Dennis is one of the most solid, positionally grounded players in the world. So Dennis plays CD and tries to take advantage. Plays knight b5, makes Magnus play bishop b4, and then he offers a trade of bishops. Magnus plays a6, pushing the knight back. Dennis finds pawn takes, and knight d4. Magnus offers a trade of bishops. Dennis says no thank you, and this. And now rook e8. And black is going to try to target white's e-pawn. Rook d1, queen b6, knight f1, the queen slides over, and we see, you know, Magnus kind of plays against Dennis in a very, he plays his game. He plays like in a very controlled manner against Dennis, because Dennis is a very positional player, slow, like he works on a position. He kind of massages the position. All right. And Magnus can play like that, but he also knows when to strike and to push the pace. So we have a trade, we have knight c6, and Dennis plays just bringing the king to f2, looking potentially for the endgame. But he's a little slow in this game. He's not able to build up much of an advantage. Magnus playing on both sides, playing on both flanks, trying to find something. Dennis captures and offers a queen trade. So Magnus is like, all right, I guess we'll take. Now, visually, this looks better for white forever, because black has this ugly pawn, and I would love this position for white. King f8. Now, if you play the move rook c5, what's funny is that after rook a8, you actually cannot make any progress. It looks like you can, but you can't. I mean, it's only like visual that it looks like you have an advantage, but there's no advantage. Black is rock solid. There is no way for you to attack this pawn unless you could teleport the knight to b7, which is not possible. If you got multiple moves in a row and got the knight to b7, then you would maybe even have a chance, but black still plays a4. So you would need, it's just not possible. All right. So knight e3, rook c5, you know, he walks the king to d2, and Magnus is just defending himself, plays g6, plays all the moves that I said, and you're just not going to beat him. Look at the time. Look at the time. Magnus asserting dominance. I mean, you can't beat me. We are generations apart, but I'm here to stay, all right? And chess still runs through Norway and through Oslo. And like I said, just like the last game, you know, it was 8-5, it was 9-9. And within a matter of 10 moves, Magnus built up a 6-minute time advantage. Like, that's not good. That, you know, that clearly shows a level of nerves, and Again, like Dennis is a very good player, but he's got 30 seconds versus 7.5 minutes. And at this point, Magnus might even play this for a win. And he is. He's playing it for a win. Dennis is desperately holding on. I mean, this is like a roller coaster, right? It's 20 seconds versus 540 against the GOAT. From a position where probably only White was playing for anything. At this point, Magnus completely changes his mindset. He's like, wait a minute, I'm gonna overload Dennis's nervous system until he blunders. Look at G5. I'm creating an outside pass pawn potentially. Rook H4, Rook G8. He's firing. Dennis has 8 seconds, 6 seconds. But he's defending. He's defending. He grabs the H pawn. Magnus gets in. Magnus a pawn down, by the way, but he's gonna go back for that E pawn. Rook A3 check, Rook A4. But unfortunately, despite his best efforts, despite Dennis trying to make it as dramatic as possible, Magnus unable to grab a victory. Rook C6, a nice idea. Bishop G4, we simplify, and it's just going to end in a draw. King E5, Rook G5, and the players shuffle and make a draw. Again, rough start for Dennis. Like, not a good start. Nervous start. As I said, equal, like, through the opening and clearly getting a slightly, more pleasant position. But by the time we get to the 29th move, he's got a minute. I mean, he spent so much time. He spent 2 minutes putting his rook on C5. That's like how I play chess against the good players. Okay, so we go to game 3, and Magnus is just going to put Dennis away. C4, we go for the same opening as last time, but this time we do things a little bit differently. And whoops, I'm adjusting the sound of the pieces if they're a little bit too loud. D5, CD knight D5, bishop G2, all of this, H6, and now takes. The queen is in the line of the bishop, so the queen is going to back up. And this is our position from the opening. You'll notice that Magnus started the game with 10 minutes and has 10:07. He's just going, he's walking Dennis down. That's what you do. Like, you're beating up a fighter, you're punching him in the stomach, you're punching him in the head, you're kicking his legs if it's legal. If it's boxing, please don't kick anybody. And that's it. He's going to put away the youngin. He's just not ready yet. Bishop B6, Bishop E3, offering a damaging to his own structure to open up an attack and pressure on the C-file. This is like the exact type of game Magnus likes. This is why the English opening is actually a fascinating opening to try to play for a win. Dennis, though, finds a clever idea to break up his structure but open his own file, right? Bishop D5. We have a very similar game to the last time where Dennis is trying to trade the bishops, but unlike the first game, you will remember that you might not remember at all. In the first game, it was a different structure, right? In this game, the pawn went there, and black has no pawn on F6, right? Take, and Dennis is just kind of sitting back and defending himself. He's doing a better job on time. In fact, in this game, Dennis starts fighting back, plays B5. He's like, you know what, Magnus? You gave me a damaged structure? You think you're so strong. Positional genius. B4. He's using his own pawn against him, and he's up on time. This is a rite of passage of every young chess player. Can you imagine beating the GOAT of a sport? Surely he hasn't had a chance to do it yet. A B4. Knight D5. Played instantly to attack the rook. Magnus gives up the bishop. Oh my goodness, Magnus was in a mood today, sacrificing for the bishop, trying to win the pawn, trying to win that pawn. And he's not showing any signs of intimidation. Obviously, he's the GOAT, but I mean, he's fighting the next generation like this. He sacks like this, takes, and you'll remember a moment ago, Magnus took a pawn. So now he gets a bishop and a pawn. He gets a bishop and 2 pawns for a rook. And he's got an outside passer. Now, the thing about this position is that if black, obviously I'm not saying this move is going to happen, but let's just say, very hypothetically, something like this happens. The endgame with no queens is probably advantageous for white. Like an endgame like this, where white can potentially get these pawns rolling, and even more so like this, is winning for white. Right? Like if you can get 2 passed pawns against the rook and a knight, it's bad. So white needs a few transformations to happen. C5 is a nice idea to stop white from ever getting the pawn to B4. Magnus plays knight D2 and knight C4, gives up the pawn on D3. But you will notice that Mr. Lazovic, for the first time in this entire match, has a time advantage. It took him 1 minute and 20 seconds to build up the courage to take the pawn on D3, but he's standing up to the bully. Queen takes D3. All right? Bishop F1 played by Magnus, and now queen back to D5. And Magnus plays queen a1, and the queen is like a lighthouse, you know, just standing on the edge of the board, shining the beams all over the place. b3 was apparently incorrect. Apparently, queen a4 was better, but queen a4 allows queen f3, and I'm not sure that looks particularly exciting to play. So obviously, he didn't like something there. Instead, he plays b3. Dennis still plays queen f3, knight c1, and it's a tactical skirmish. Knight takes e5, but queen e4. Magnus's queen is hanging and his knight in the center. But uh-oh, Dennis is down on time. But no, he's not. Queen e5, but here comes the a-pawn. Magnus is a full rook down. But Dennis has 30 seconds again. It took him a whole minute to play queen to d5. Magnus plays a7. Bishop g2 is coming. He's going to make a queen. Who's going to stop him? Who's going to stop him? Rook a8. Queen b5. You can't take the rook because of queen b8 check, and I'm threatening bishop g2. But bishop g2, there's queen d1 check. So the queen goes back. Queen b... Oh my god, he blundered. Oh my god, Dennis blundered. Dennis should have played queen b3. It was just winning. Queen takes b3 was winning. If queen c5 defending the pawn, you can play queen a2. You can play queen b2. You can play queen b1. And the idea is that there is no way to get closer to the rook. For example, if I play... like queen d6, you can just take the pawn. But the idea of queen b1 is, you know, you're going to get the pawn in a moment. You just have to guard your knight. You just got to get the knight out. So for example, if I play king g2, you can give me a check. You can take the pawn. You play queen d7, knight b3. So Dennis is completely winning, but he blunders. He blunders, and now he has 17 seconds on the clock. Knight b3. Magnus is he's trying to escape with his knight. Bishop c4. But now knight d2. Now Magnus plays bishop d5. But first he grabs the pawn, which is wrong. He had to play bishop d5 right away by taking the pawn with check. Now if he plays bishop to d5, there was rook takes a7. And after takes, there is takes. And black is winning. What he had to do in that position, oh my goodness, Dennis was so close. If rook a7 now you take. You say, what's the difference? What's the difference? Now this. You can't go here. But because Magnus took first and then wanted to go to, he couldn't do that. The bishop had to end up on that square, not on that square. That's the difference. It was the positioning of the bishop. Now, all of a sudden, in a crazy scramble, Dennis is winning again. E4, and now with an extra rook, he picks up the pawn in the 40th move. His king is mercilessly hunted, a moment away from getting mated. But he consolidates, and it's nice to be up a rook in chess because you win. And that was Dennis's first win, a tense one, a nervy one, but he takes down Magnus Carlsen, and now he can not just save the match and tie it up, he could win. He could win. This is the Chessable Masters Grand Final, and oh my goodness, that was crazy. Magnus, in a crazy complicated position, kind of went for queen a2 and then knight e5, but he's losing. And the reason you might be wondering why he couldn't defend himself is because of rook to d1. There's a threat on the queen and a threat of mate. So for example, queen b2, rook f1, and this completely ridiculous checkmate in the corner where the king can't escape. It was crazy. It was a very tactical game. Magnus loses to Dennis Lazovic. What the hell is going on? Oh my god. So now we have one last game. Dennis could actually knock out Magnus. What? He's 17 years old. He turned 17 3 months ago. Can you imagine beating the GOAT in a position like that? That was a nervous game, but he got it done. Magnus plays the bishop g4 slow Slav, h3, take, e6. So he trades the light squared bishop, puts the pawns on the light squares, knight c3, puts the bishop active, both guys castle. And listen, Dennis is a queen's pawn player. I mean, you look at Dennis's position, he is so tough to beat. This is a nut that does not crack. He is so annoying with his repertoire. He is so solid. Beating him requires risk. So you got to open yourself up to a counterpunch. So Magnus gives up the center. And then he brings the bishop back, and he once again plays this e5 idea, but it's not without risk. You see, it's not without risk because you're giving up the entirety of the center. Now Dennis has an advantage, but Magnus has to go through the fire. So bishop here. Dennis here spends 40 seconds. He senses that this bishop is going to grow powerful. The best way to claim an advantage here for white is to take this pawn. Let the bishop live. And then you play queen f3, and then you bring your rooks. For example, let's say black plays like rook b8. You play b3, solid. Let's say black plays, I don't know, h6. And you can play knight e2 and try to maneuver with the bishop here. That's what you got to do. You got to punish Magnus for giving you the center, risking a damaging of his structure, but this is what Magnus is very calculated. Dennis plays bishop e3. See, Dennis is a solid player. This is not Stockfish's top choice. Stockfish prefers to keep more pieces on the board. Queen f3 with the idea of knight e2, knight g3, maybe here, maybe g4, g5 in the future. Dennis just trades his bishop. So take. Magnus is like, all right, you know what? Queen trade. Now here, ironically, trading queens and playing this endgame is better for white than what Dennis does. Dennis has no queen trade. So he's like solid, but almost slightly flawed, like in a slightly flawed way. Like now he preserves the queens and he gets this. CD, knight d5, knight d5. Dennis takes with the bishop. So he wants to give up the bishop for the knight, and the idea, I suppose, is to take with, I mean, the pawn is fine, but maybe even the rook. Symmetrical structure, microscopic advantage, play the position forever, black can't win. Queen e7, Magnus says, no, I want to win. I want to preserve imbalance. So Magnus does not trade knight for bishop. He offers the trade of rooks, otherwise Dennis would have control of the file. And now we have queen, queen, rook, rook, knight versus bishop. G3, G6, king G7. The king and the pawn step up to get out of the way of the bishop. So you control your dark squares. King G2, both guys do it. Queen F3. Now, rook D3. This is the endgame. Okay, fascinating. Symmetrical structure, queen versus bishop. Who's better? Well, they say queen and knight are the ultimate combo because they can move like every piece in chess. Queen gets rook bishop, and king and pawn, obviously, and knight is a knight. So the knight would love to go there. If the knight gets on d4 and has a plant in the white position, it's going to be very annoying. Queen c5. Let's look at Dennis's time. a5. King up to f3. Queen back to c8. Right, Dennis goes back. Magnus looking. Plays h5. I mean, you got to do something against Dennis, right? Dennis plays bishop b3. Spends a minute. He spends a minute moving the bishop back to the home square. So it's like it's a coming of age. You know, it's like you gotta be brave against. Look at Magnus playing every pawn forward. He senses the nervousness. Bishop d5, queen d7, king g2. Now Dennis says, you know what, Magnus? b4. b4 in and of itself makes sense. The idea of b4 is you freeze your opponent's pawn on the same color square as your bishop. So logically, in a position like this, white wins every endgame because white is going to win his opponent's pawns. So b4 actually makes sense, but it's a mistake. Shockingly, despite this move looking to make sense in every type of endgame because the pawn for black gets fixed, it's a mistake. Can you believe it? How is Magnus going to exploit that though? Can he show that there's levels? Magnus plays a4. Why? He wants to keep more pawns on the board. That's it. a4 is just like, I want to keep stuff on the board. I want more targets to attack in the future. Dennis now plays f4. So the last two moves, b4, f4, a little bit too nervous, a little bit like jumpy. So Dennis has weakened his king and potentially given Magnus a target, queen c7. Dennis plays queen d2, spends a minute on this move. He's got to be able to get it together, play just a little bit faster. King goes to e7, Magnus misses a chance. Apparently queen d6 was really strong. I don't know what the idea is. Like, let's say king f3. I can't actually, I don't actually understand. Maybe it's like a tactic. Yeah, I guess it's just a tactic in the center. But Magnus goes king e7 and Dennis plays e5. He's right back in the game. Oh my goodness. He's in a queen endgame. Magnus missed the chance. Apparently he had to play queen d6 in this position. Queen d6 to prevent these pieces from coming forward. But he doesn't. And now this. And now Dennis is back in the game against Magnus. Back in the game. Magnus plays queen d7. The craziest thing about queen d7 is it's a draw. I think you can take and make a draw. King f3. Let's say king e6, trying to go king d5. You just play this. And shockingly, king e3 is the draw. If g5 trying to pry you apart, you just go king e4. If g4, you take and the pawn is in the square, so you can't actually promote. So Magnus plays queen d7, but it's a little bit of a bluff. But trading the queens is really stressful there because you don't want to be the clown who trades the queens in a drawn endgame. So he says no queen trade. Queen d3. Now Magnus is winning. Magnus here has to find the unbelievable winning idea. G5 check. Sacrificing a pawn in a queen endgame, the idea is nuts. If this, you go here, If there, you get mated. If this, you play queen h3, king g5, queen here. Anywhere the king moves, you take and you take. The other idea of g5 is unbelievable. If FG, you trade queens, and the king is too far. And that is why moments ago, the move a4 was so smart, because you never know when that pawn is going to collapse. So that would have been the winning idea for Magnus. It would have been to play pawn to g5 check and get a queen trade, because you promote. And if you don't do that, then take, b4, and this, that's the winning idea. And maybe you don't have to play b4 right away. You could take first, and then b4 in the next move. But that's the point. But Magnus misses it. He misses it. Now Dennis gives up the pawn, forces the king back. Magnus is a pawn up, but it's a draw. It's apparently a perpetual because Dennis's king is getting in. Queen b5 check, king e7, and it's a draw. It's a draw. Dennis is only down one pawn, but it's a draw because his b pawn is so strong. But the human urge to give checks, right? Queen e5 check, but now Magnus's queen gets back, which is going to make the job infinitely harder. b5 apparently was a potential drawing mechanism. Both guys at 10 seconds. Queen e6, queen b8, king e7, queen c7, and now Dennis goes here, and it's a blunder. It's a blunder. Because if you trade the queens, you actually lose. But guess what? f6 is the winning move. Because after take, h pawn, queens, but Magnus misses it! Oh my goodness! He misses f6, fe5, Magnus plays king e7, and now Dennis has to play b5. It's the only move. How is that possible? b5. None of Magnus's pawns can move. So king d7 goes to stop it, and now you play king f6. Because when this pawn goes down, king f7, pawn to h3, e6, and you also queen, and it's a draw. But Dennis couldn't help himself. He went backwards. He went backwards. Magnus approached, so he went back. It's like in fighting. It's like in fighting. A guy fakes to throw a punch, so you're like, oh, I got to block. But you don't. He needed to go forward. He needed to walk Magnus down with his b pawn. It was a split-second decision. Magnus couldn't run forward here. He would have had to go respect the b pawn, and you needed to go in. You needed to get your pawns moving together. But Dennis went back. And now it is over. It's over because he's never going to get to the b. He's never going to join his pawns. You could push the b pawn now. It doesn't matter. h4. You could push your b pawn now. It doesn't matter because I'm going to go here. And you're too slow. You're not on f6. Right? We're not there. We went back. So Dennis takes a step back out of respect. And unfortunately, he is just losing king e5 and he just resigns. He resigns because if he stops this pawn, I'm stopping those pawns and I have 3. That's the problem. You can't stop 3. There's nothing you can do. I can't, come forward. I got to be really careful. But 3 pawns is too much. 3 pawns is too much. You can't stop 3 pawns. It just doesn't work. And I'll play king d4. I'll play king e3. And that's the end of the game. Oh my goodness, he came so close. He beat Magnus straight up in a game for the first time, and he was so close. And it's nice to see, it's nice to see Lazovic getting a chance to play Magnus in a best of 4. He did draw him and lose to him in Toronto in the Champions Chess Tour Final 2023. But another young man to keep your eye on, Denis Lazovic, superstar, really, really strong. Hopefully he gets more opportunities this year in 2024. And the next generation is coming. It's coming for the GOAT. Well, we could debate. Maybe it's Kasparov, blah, blah, blah. Magnus himself said it's Kasparov, but we could debate that. But fun to see. 17 years old, beating Magnus Carlsen. Hopefully big things for him in the future. Unfortunately, Dennis actually was knocked out earlier today in the losers bracket of the Chessable Masters, so he finishes in the semifinals there. And the ultimate final will be decided by Magnus and Firouzja. But cool stuff. That's all I have for you today. Get out of here.